I would like to apologize for the poor audio in this video. I am currently not at home or anywhere close to it, so I don't have the setup to record well, so I'm sorry about that. Hello and welcome. My name is Maxine, and today I'm making a critique of Subnautica Below Zero. There will be 4 sections in the order given: gameplay, story, graphics, and the conclusion. I will only talk about spoilers in the story section of the critique, other than minor spoilers in the gameplay section, and I will give a warning before giving them. So, as the title suggests, I will be attempting to answer the question, is Subnautica Below Zero the perfect sequel to Subnautica? And, well, before we get to that answer, I'll have to determine exactly what Subnautica was all about, which is what I'll do here in the introduction. Subnautica is a game that was in early access for about 3 years, and in that time many people played it. Then it was finally released, and everyone played it again because it was just that good. Now, what exactly is it about Subnautica that brings people in? Why is the game so popular and so loved? Well, given my understanding of the game, in case I'm wrong, don't be upset, I believe it's because of its exploration, the mystery surrounding the precursors, the true horror you get when you go deep down and hear something roar. Some people would say one of the best parts of Subnautica is how you're all alone, and only you can save yourself. No one really talks to you, your character doesn't talk, he has no personality. These are possibly the reasons why people love Subnautica. Please let me know if I missed any. The one thing that is guaranteed is that many people do love the game. But now let's move on to the first section of the critique. Starting off with this section, the gameplay consists of you collecting materials, fabricating items, getting food and water, exploring the sea, and also exploring above ground in an Arctic-type area. It also consists of creating a base and vehicles and using your new tools to your advantage to aid you in your exploration. There are objectives in the game, but they don't really have quest markers. They are more general things you're given, and you have to figure everything else out for yourself. I will cover each of these things individually and talk about how well I think the game does for each part. Let's start off with collecting materials. So, the good news is, collecting materials is better in this game than in the last. There are more things that help you find resources in this game. All there was before was a scanner room, and then you needed the HUD chip to find any of the resources quickly, which the HUD chip costed endgame materials, so that wasn't exactly helpful. The smaller map makes it really easy to get resources quickly because they are all over the place. Then we get to what is probably my biggest critique of the game: storage and fabrication. Storing items and fabricating them is the exact same as it was in the first game, which is terrible. Items not being able to stack at all, and each piece costing inventory space, means you need a lot of chests, and with all those chests you better sort it, or finding things could take a long time. With the amount of space, food, and water and tools and extra batteries takes up, going adventuring you only have about half your inventory space to collect materials, and even if you were able to fill most of your inventory, it still wouldn't be very much. Storing items is a huge pain, but thankfully after playing Subnautica I got used to it, but I still think it's an issue. The more annoying thing is fabrication. You can only fabricate one thing at a time. Even if you have 12 bladderfish in your inventory and you just want to craft all of them, you have to wait 10 seconds for each craft and just sit there and click the button 12 times. A mod I played with in the first game and then I played with in Below Zero for after about 12 hours of playing is easy crafting. It makes it so that you can fabricate with any materials you have in your storage in your base. I think that should be a base feature. It's a really nice quality of life thing that would have been a great addition to the game. Having to find every single resource from your chest for crafting something gets annoying pretty quickly. Even with the fact that I sorted everything, it all just took forever and was wasting time I could have spent having fun in the game. I don't think the storage is a big issue by itself, but combined with how you craft items makes it terrible for things like base building and many other parts of the game. The survival aspect is good. Getting food and water is really easy, it isn't much of an issue, but that isn't a bad thing. Slowly upgrading your oxygen and getting vehicles to go further is also good, like it was in Subnautica. The added heat mechanic is interesting and works well for what it does. More intense systems would have hurt the game, and the fact that it is also nice and simple is perfect and allows exploration to be the main focus of the game, which is the greatest thing they could have done. Overall, the survival is probably the best it could be for the game. Anything more complicated would have been worse. The map size is significantly smaller than the first game, but exploration is still fun, but a bit worse than the first game. Pretty much every nook and cranny you look in will have a secret in it. which is great. Exploring the ocean is terrifying and awesome. Finding new artifacts and PDAs make the exploration a lot of fun. The map being smaller makes the game feel shorter. Subnautica had so much more to it, and the fact that this game is a lot smaller means there's a lot less to explore. There are barely any bases to find, and the ones that do exist are extremely small and pretty much only have one room, with no lore items in them. The biggest new thing is land exploration. There was land exploration in the first game, but there was nothing like there is here. The land exploration is good. Most of it feels pretty empty, with not too many interesting things to look at other than at specific areas. Though, that is what a lot of the ocean is. You move quite fast, so you don't have to dwell on the empty space at all. Exploring above ground is a great change of pace from swimming, and I think that's good. Overall, the exploration in this game is good, but you can really feel how small the map is, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Now I'm going to talk about the new vehicles. If you are avoiding all information about Below Zero, just skip ahead a bit. I will be avoiding most spoilers on most of it. I'm just going to talk about what the trailers have already showed. The new sea truck is fine. Some people say it's really bad because it replaces both the Cyclops and the Seamoth, and it's worse than both, which I don't think that's entirely true for this game specifically. I mean, yes, it is worse than the Cyclops because it loses nearly all customization. And yeah, it's worse than the Seamoth because it's slower and more annoying once you add modules. But there is no need for the Cyclops in the game, and the Seamoth didn't fit either. The Cyclops was a portable base, and that was great. But in this game, it's unneeded. There's no reason to have a portable base when you're always a minute away from your base. Set your base up anywhere, and you'll still be able to get there in a minute or two from anywhere on the map. The Cyclops would not have fit in such a small map, so the Sea Truck is a great alternative. The Seamoth would have been nice, but it makes sense to remove it because there isn't a need for it when you have the Sea Truck. The Sea Truck starts off as a weird-looking Seamoth, and then you upgrade it to be more of a tiny base that you move around. Now that I've defended the Sea Truck, I'm going to talk about what I think it does wrong. Most of the modules are nice to have, but are worthless because they slow it down a lot. The Sea Truck with more than 3 modules is slower than the base swim speed, which is very slow. So, all you are going to use are the storage module and the docking module, nothing else, because any more and it goes way too slow. Then, the storage module has a small amount of storage in it, especially if you keep water, food, batteries, and power cells and stuff you might only use sometimes, like the propulsion cannon. I always found myself filling up the storage in a couple minutes, when in the amount of space it takes up, I could have fit more storage in there if the game had just let us make our own modules, but instead they didn't want us to have convenient high-capacity storage on the Sea Truck, which is annoying. Also, you might use the Fabricator module, but adding that module into the mix means you're going like 30% slower, and the Fabricator is the same size as the other modules, but it adds a tiny Fabricator and a storage with like 10 slots, and has a lot of open space on it that could have been filled with something useful. This just feels terribly designed, not made in any fun way at all. The Sea Truck is fine, but its issues keep it from feeling good. Then there is the new above-ground vehicle, the Snow Fox. I won't spoil it much, but I will say, though, its controls are terrible. You will understand what I mean when you play the game, unless they change it. Moving around is very unintuitive, and is a pain with it, so I resolved to running everywhere, as the Snow Fox isn't needed to get around, considering how fast you move around and how easy it is to deal with the heat mechanic. I don't want to say much more about it, but it's really bad. The objectives for this game are perfect. So many games have quest markers that lead you straight to a story objective, and that works fine in some games, but here it would have been terrible. In this game you are given vague objectives, and you slowly work towards them as you play the game. You complete them by exploring, or eventually you do get a quest marker, but it never really tells you it's a story location, it just presents it as the first game did with Rex, a location to explore. Though I never needed any of the markers. Exploring made it so I was able to finish the game pretty quickly once I started working towards it. Story objective markers would have been terrible for this game, and I'm glad they only semi-exist for things. Overall, exploring, surviving, finding materials is good. It's mostly fun. It does have its downsides though, like storage, fabrication, the vehicles are okay, the Snow Fox is horrible. Though the exploring is worse than in the first game due to there being a lot less, it is still a lot of fun. The survival is good, it's the best it could have been for this game. Finding materials is 100% better than the first game. Storage isn't terrible by itself, but is magnified by the fabrication, which can take forever and isn't very fun to use when you want to build things. The sea truck is fine, it is a better alternative to the Cyclops in this game due to how small the map is, and the Snow Fox is terrible. It has terrible controls, and it isn't needed at all. Looking at everything, I think exploration should be the biggest thing to consider when rating the game, so I will give it a 7.5 out of 10 on gameplay. Moving on to the story, there definitely will be spoilers for this, but I'll first talk about how well I think it did, then talk about the story itself. I will notify when spoilers begin. In Subnautica Below Zero, instead of having a silent protagonist and no other survivors, they decided to have an actual protagonist this time, who has their own goals and reasons for coming to the planet. Now, a lot of people say that this was a terrible decision, but I think it works well. The first game did a fantastic job at making you feel alone, and that was great, but in this game, trying to accomplish that again wouldn't have worked as well, so they decided to go in a different direction, and it worked great. The way the story worked was you were either directed towards areas if you waited long enough, or you went out of your way and explored and found them yourself. For the majority of the game, I found everything by myself, by mostly stumbling into things, and with the smaller map, you end up having a pretty easy time finding things. In my playthrough, I ended up getting a lot of story stuff done before even continuing to the story, to the point where the thing is relevant. This resulted in some words from the main character that didn't make any sense. The game doesn't account for what you know, it always plays dialogue, and sometimes it doesn't make any sense. Overall, it's not a big issue, but it certainly is an issue. The story was overall good, it was better than the first game, but that wasn't hard to beat considering the first one barely had an actual story. Now I'm going to go a bit deeper, and I will be spoiling the entire story. So, in Subnautica Below Zero, you play as Robin Ayu, who has come to the planet to learn about what happened to her sister. The game opens with her sneaking onto the planet. The story doesn't exactly follow a strict path, so a lot of this can be done in any order. So, usually, people first find a precursor facility and get injected with Alan, who is a precursor. Throughout the game, as you do things, Alan and Robin will talk with each other. At this point, you get your second main objective, get Alan out of you, which entails building Alan a body. As time passes, Alan gives you waypoints that lead to artifacts, and very rarely, blueprints for his body. There is a sub-story with a real person, which leads to you finding out more details about your sister's death. There is a hidden area, which normally wouldn't be found until the very end of the game, unless you're like me and stumble upon it, where you learn the location of the main objective pertaining to your sister. So, basically, your sister found out that Altera wanted to study the Karar bacteria and harness it, and she made an antidote for it, hid it inside a cave you can only access with a spy pangling, and then proceeded to try and destroy the cave leading to the dead frozen Leviathan, which is infected with living Karar bacteria, which is what they were studying. She died, failing at doing that. The main objective then becomes finding the antidote and finishing your sister's work. Finding the antidote isn't that bad, and finishing the objective is easy. I enjoyed that part of the story, and the voice acting was pretty good. The second main objective takes you to many areas of the map, pretty much all of them dangerous. You need to get 3 parts scanned, 2 of them in very dangerous areas. One of them is above ground surrounded by an ice worm, another is relatively safe, and the last one is found in the most dangerous area in the game, the Crystal Caverns, which contains the Shadow Leviathan, which is quite scary. After you get all 3 scans, you need the materials to craft all 3 parts, and you need to go back to the Crystal Caverns and go deeper, and find the Fabricator Caverns, which contains the Precursor Fabricator base, which is where you fabricate a body for Alan. Each piece you fabricate, Alan tells you more about how the Karar broke containment, and how it was his fault, and it is a really good set of dialogues. The voice actors did a pretty good job here. Alan leaves your body, and Robin tells Alan that she wants to help him in any way she can. Alan tells her to go to the Phase Gate facility, which is then added to the waypoints. Robin makes her way there, and then after a few minutes of setup, she and Alan leave the planet and go to Alan's homeworld. We get to see some of the world, and then the game ends. Alan grows and develops throughout the story, being changed by Robin as he learns what hope is and comes to care for her, and is glad that she is going with him. It's a fantastic ending, and I really hope we get to see where it goes from there. Ending the spoiler talk and this section, the story is really good and the ending is fantastic. The character development is good, and overall I enjoyed the experience very much, though I don't think it's perfect, so it gets an 8.5 out of 10. Moving on to the graphics, there isn't much to say. The game looks beautiful as it did in the first game. A lot of things have been improved, and the game looks great. Some things could use some collision, though. As I said, not much to say. Now I'll move on. Moving on to the end of this critique, the game was overall a lot of fun, but had some issues with the gameplay. The issues with fabrication were in the first game, so it's kind of disappointing they don't see it as an issue. Storage is just annoying, but you get used to it. The tool additions are interesting, and the sea trek is fine, but the Snow Fox is terrible. The smaller map actually makes doing things a lot easier, and ends up being at first disappointing, then later feels really nice. Now, talking about the story, playing as a character that speaks and has their own thoughts and opinions is great. The dialogue for the character is great, and the story is overall very enjoyable. Concluding, Subnautica Below Zero took a new direction, and it did a great job in most aspects. For this reason, Subnautica Below Zero gets an 8 out of 10 from me. Though, we're not done yet. The main question in the video and in the title is asking if Subnautica Below Zero is the perfect sequel. So, is it? It definitely isn't perfect, but it is quite close. Story-wise, it is the perfect sequel. It added a real story. It didn't try to repeat the first game. It did something new and it worked. At least it did for me. That part of it is perfect. The part that drags it down are the issues with gameplay. The sequel isn't perfect, but that was never going to happen. Subnautica was an amazing game, and there was no way they could get everything right. But honestly, I believe that it is perfect in the way that mattered. It needed to go in a new direction, and it did. Who knows what will happen in the next game, but I'm excited to see. So, the answer is no, it isn't the perfect sequel, but it's perfect where it matters, and it's the best possible way they could have taken the series. Repeating the same formula wouldn't have worked. We already felt alone, and we disabled the thing that made us stuck on the planet. They couldn't have done the same thing, and what they did do worked. I hope you all enjoyed my critique. I wanted to get it out sooner, but I was unable to. If you're watching this still, thank you for making it this far, and if you liked the video, I will hopefully be making more. I hope you all enjoyed Below Zero as much as I did.